My name is Isabella Martinez, and 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. I was 24, fresh out of college with a degree in business administration, and completely broke. My parents had sacrificed everything to send me to university, working double shifts at their restaurant in East LA just so I could have the opportunities they never had. But the job market was brutal. Every interview ended the same way: "We'll be in touch," followed by silence. My student loans were piling up, and I watched my parents' worried glances when they thought I wasn't looking. The weight of their expectations felt heavier than the California sun beating down on our small apartment. That's when I saw the posting on a job board outside the local community center. Domestic assistant needed for prominent family in Beverly Hills. Discretion required. Excellent compensation. I almost walked past it. Cleaning houses wasn't exactly what I'd spent 4 years studying for. But desperation has a way of humbling you. The Whitmore mansion stood like something out of a movie, all white columns and manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people's annual salary. As I walked up the circular driveway, my second-hand interview outfit felt more inadequate with each step. The morning fog was just lifting, revealing the sprawling estate in all its intimidating glory. Mrs. Catherine Whitmore answered the door herself, which surprised me. She was elegant in that effortless way that money can buy. Perfectly styled silver hair, understated jewelry that probably cost more than my car. But her eyes were kind, tired in a way that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy burdens. "You must be Isabella," she said, her voice warm despite the formality of the setting. "Please, come in." The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. Marble floors that reflected the crystal chandelier overhead, artwork that I recognized from my art history classes, and a staircase that curved like something from a fairy tale. But there was something hollow about it all, like a beautiful shell with nothing inside. "I should be honest with you," Mrs. Whitmore said as she led me to a sitting room overlooking the garden. "This position requires more than just cleaning. My family is complicated. We need someone who can be discreet, someone who understands that what happens in this house stays in this house." I nodded, though I had no idea what I was agreeing to. "I understand, Mrs. Whitmore." She studied my face for a long moment. "My husband, Richard, is a prominent businessman. Our son, James, is struggling, and I'm afraid I haven't been the mother or wife I should have been." Her voice cracked slightly. "We need someone who can help us remember what it means to be a family." The salary she offered made my eyes widen. It was more than I'd ever dreamed of making, enough to pay off my loans and help my parents with their restaurant. But there was something in her expression that told me I'd be earning every penny. My first week at the Whitmore house was like learning to navigate a minefield. Mr. Richard Whitmore was everything his wife wasn't: cold, demanding, and completely absorbed in his phone calls about mergers and acquisitions. He barely acknowledged my presence, which I quickly learned was a blessing. James, their 19-year-old son, was a different story entirely. I found him on my third day, passed out in the pool house surrounded by empty bottles and the remnants of what had clearly been a wild party. His friends had long since abandoned him, leaving behind a mess that told the story of privilege without responsibility. "Great, another babysitter," he mumbled when I gently shook him awake. His eyes were bloodshot, his expensive clothes wrinkled and stained. Despite his condition, I could see he had his mother's kind eyes, just clouded with pain and confusion. "I'm Isabella, the new housekeeper," I said, offering him a glass of water. "And you look like you need this more than attitude." He laughed bitterly. "Housekeeper? Is that what they're calling spies now?" Over the following weeks, I began to understand the dynamics of this broken family. Mr. Whitmore worked 18-hour days, coming home only to eat dinner in silence before disappearing into his study. Mrs. Whitmore spent her time organizing charity events and maintaining the perfect facade for their social circle. And James was drowning in expectations he felt he could never meet. I found myself becoming more than just a housekeeper. I was the one who made sure James ate actual food instead of surviving on energy drinks and whatever his friends brought to their parties. I was the one who listened when Mrs. Whitmore needed to talk about her fears for her son. I was the one who quietly managed the household while the family fell apart around me. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday evening. I was cleaning the living room when I heard raised voices from Mr. Whitmore's study. James had apparently crashed his car. Nothing serious, but it was the third incident in 2 months. "You're a disappointment," Mr. Whitmore's voice carried through the heavy door. "Your mother and I have given you everything, and this is how you repay us? You've given me everything except parents who actually care," James shot back. I heard footsteps, then the sound of a door slamming. A few minutes later, James appeared in the living room, his face flushed with anger and hurt. "You heard all that, didn't you?" he asked, slumping onto the expensive sofa. "I heard a father who's scared and a son who's hurting," I said quietly, "and both of you too proud to admit it." That night, for the first time since I'd started working there, James talked to me. Really talked. He told me about the pressure he felt to live up to his father's success, about feeling like nothing he did was ever good enough. He talked about his mother's sadness, which he blamed himself for, and his father's distance, which felt like rejection. "Sometimes I think they'd be better off without me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Don't say that," I replied firmly. "Your parents love you. They just don't know how to show it." 3 months into my employment, I discovered something that changed everything. I was organizing Mrs. Whitmore's desk, with her permission, of course, when I found a folder marked James College Applications. Inside were acceptance letters from several prestigious universities, all unopened. My heart sank as I realized what this meant. James had been accepted to schools across the country, opportunities that could give him the fresh start he desperately needed. But somehow, these letters had never reached him. That evening, I found Mrs. Whitmore in the garden, tending to her roses in the fading light. She looked peaceful for once, lost in the simple task of caring for something beautiful. "Mrs. Whitmore," I began carefully, "I found something today that I think you should know about." Her face went pale when I mentioned the letters. She sat down heavily on the garden bench, her hands shaking. "I know about them," she whispered. "Richard, he intercepted them. He wants James to stay close, to eventually take over the business. He thinks if James doesn't know about these acceptances, he'll have no choice but to fall in line." "But that's not fair to James," I said, sitting beside her. "He has a right to know about his options." "I know," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I've been such a coward. I was afraid that if James left, I'd lose him forever. This house is so empty already." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the fountain and the distant sound of traffic. Finally, Mrs. Whitmore stood up, her spine straightening with newfound resolve. "Will you help me?" she asked. "I want to make this right, but I can't do it alone." The plan we hatched was simple, but risky. We would tell James about the acceptance letters, but we needed to do it in a way that wouldn't destroy the family completely. Mrs. Whitmore decided to host a small dinner party, just the family, under the pretense of celebrating a business deal of her husband's. The night of the dinner, the tension in the dining room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mr. Whitmore was suspicious about the sudden family gathering, and James looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. But Mrs. Whitmore had found her courage. "Richard, James," she began, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "There's something we need to discuss, something that affects our whole family." She reached into her purse and pulled out the folder of acceptance letters. James's eyes widened as he recognized the university logos on the envelopes. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "These are your acceptance letters," Mrs. Whitmore said, placing them in front of him. "Letters that you should have received months ago." The explosion that followed was everything I'd feared and more. Mr. Whitmore's face turned red with rage as he realized his secret was out. James stared at the letters in disbelief, then at his father with growing anger. "You kept these from me?" James's voice was quiet, but there was a dangerous edge to it. "You let me think I wasn't good enough, that I was a failure, when all along—" "I was protecting you," Mr. Whitmore shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Those schools would have filled your head with liberal nonsense. You belong here, with the family business." The weeks that followed the dinner revelation were the most challenging of my time with the Whitmores. Mr. Whitmore barely spoke to his wife. James had retreated into angry silence, and Mrs. Whitmore was consumed with guilt over her years of enabling her husband's controlling behavior. But sometimes, the hardest truths are the ones that set us free. James had chosen to attend Stanford University, accepting their offer for the spring semester. The acceptance letter had been accompanied by a partial scholarship, recognition of his academic achievements that his father had never acknowledged. For the first time since I'd known him, James had purpose and hope in his eyes. Mrs. Whitmore had found her voice too. She'd started standing up to her husband, insisting on family dinners and open communication. She'd also begun volunteering at a local community center, working with families struggling with addiction and family dysfunction. Helping others seemed to give her the strength she needed to heal her own family. Mr. Whitmore was the holdout. He'd built his identity around being the provider and decision-maker for his family, and accepting that his control had nearly destroyed them was a bitter pill to swallow. But love has a way of wearing down even the most stubborn pride. The turning point came on James's last night before leaving for college. I was in the kitchen preparing his favorite meal as a farewell dinner when I heard Mr. Whitmore's voice from the hallway. "Son, can we talk?" Through the doorway, I could see father and son standing awkwardly in the foyer, years of hurt and misunderstanding between them. "I owe you an apology," Mr. Whitmore said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was so afraid of losing you that I almost lost you anyway. I thought if I could control your choices, I could protect you from making the mistakes I made." James was quiet for a long moment. "What mistakes, Dad? I chose money over family, success over relationships. I built this empire, but I nearly lost everything that actually mattered." Mr. Whitmore's voice cracked. "I don't want you to be like me, James. I want you to be better." That night, we had our farewell dinner, all four of us together for the first time in months. The conversation flowed naturally, filled with memories and hopes for the future. James talked about his plans to study environmental science, his dream of starting a company that could make a real difference in the world. His parents listened with genuine interest, asking questions and offering support. As I served dessert, Mrs. Whitmore stood up, raising her glass of wine. "I'd like to make a toast," she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears, "to Isabella, who came into our house as a housekeeper, but became the heart of our family. You helped us find our way back to each other." I felt my cheeks flush as all eyes turned to me. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No," James said firmly. "You saw us when we couldn't see ourselves. You believed in us when we'd stopped believing in each other." Mr. Whitmore cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Isabella, I want you to know that you'll always have a job here, for as long as you want it. But more than that, you'll always be part of this family." 6 months later, I'm still with the Whitmores, but everything has changed. James is thriving at Stanford, calling home regularly and visiting whenever he can. Mrs. Whitmore has found her passion in her volunteer work, and she's started taking art classes, something she'd always wanted to do but never had the courage to try. Mr. Whitmore has learned to delegate more at work, making time for the family dinners that have become sacred in their household. As for me, I've started taking business classes in the evenings, with the Whitmores' encouragement and financial support. Mrs. Whitmore says I have a gift for bringing people together, for seeing solutions where others see only problems. Maybe someday I'll start my own consulting firm, helping other families find their way back to each other. But for now, I'm exactly where I need to be. Because sometimes the most important job you'll ever have isn't the one you studied for in school. It's the one that finds you when you're brave enough to open your heart to the possibility that love, patience, and understanding can heal even the deepest wounds. The envelope Mrs. Whitmore handed me that final night wasn't just my salary. It was a letter of recommendation, glowing with praise for my dedication and integrity. But more than that, it was a symbol of trust, of the bonds we'd forged through the hardest times. When I opened it in front of the family, the silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of love, gratitude, and the promise of a future built on honesty and mutual respect. Sometimes the most profound moments happen not with grand gestures, but with quiet recognition of the ways we've changed each other's lives. In the end, I learned that being just a maid was never really about cleaning houses at all. It was about cleaning hearts, clearing away the dust of old hurts and misunderstandings, and polishing the bonds that make a house into a home.